The House's Future of Defense Task Force argues the Defense Department should identify, retire, and replace legacy platforms cost too much and are outdated. The Defense Department has to decide first, though, what a legacy platform is. Thomas Mahnken is President, Chief Executive Officer of the Center for Strategic and Budgetary Assessments. He's former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Policy Planning and writing about legacy systems in Defense News. Tom, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. You may forgive the cynic in me for thinking that the members of that task force are the only members of Congress who want to retire anything. What do you suggest we do to evaluate legacy systems, how we decide which are the ones that should go away?
Well, first, it's always a pleasure to be with you. And look, I think, we need to have a conversation about what exactly a legacy system is. It's not just about age, or maybe even mainly about age. A cost definitely should factor in, but we think that more important is assessing the role of that system in modern warfare. How well can it network? How well can it speak with others? How adaptive is it to new missions, to new capabilities? How interoperable is it with our allies? We think those are the types of criteria that really should be front and center as we think about what really a legacy system is.
I compare the list that you and your colleague Christopher Bassler write about in Defense News to the discussion more broadly across the government in outputs versus outcomes. It strikes me that you're trying to measure the outcomes that a system provides rather than the outputs. Am I reading that right, Tom?
Yeah, no, absolutely right. How can that system contribute to our effectiveness on the battlefield? And how can it contribute to our effectiveness in deterring adversaries? So I think you're exactly right.
There's one point, there are 8 or so of these criteria that you cite in this piece, but the last one on the list is the one that intrigued me the most. How easy or difficult would it be to replace the platform? If more is needed, how easily and how quickly and at what cost can they be obtained? How healthy is the industrial base that supports it? We've found over the years, Tom, obviously, that looks a lot different at the front end than it does in the middle or the back end. I might cite the F-35 program as one example of that. Is there a way to measure what you're proposing that we measure objectively, or is it subjective and we just have to take the fact that it will look different as time goes on?
Well, I think you're right. It does look different as time goes on. And so, that gets to the issue of replacements, right? In some cases, it may be buying more. How easy is it to replace attrition, to buy more of the same thing? In other cases, it may be, well, what's the next best thing? What are the substitutes? And we've gotten out of the habit of thinking in those terms. But I think for better and worse, in an era where we're competing with some pretty capable powers, we're going to need to get back to that type of thinking.
I cite one example, and I know there are many all across the department, but the example of Joint All-Domain Command and Control, a dramatically, radically different way of warfighting and providing information to warfighters than we've ever seen before. Does that kind of radical transformation that technology is driving make it easier or harder to identify legacy systems, Tom?
Well, I think in some ways easier, because it brings to the forefront connectivity, right, and ability to communicate with other systems. And I think increasingly that's a more and more important criterion for judging the value of a system.
So the thread that I pull from that then is that it should be easier, and it should make Congress more willing to say, this thing that doesn't really connect well to modern systems should be a pretty easy one for us to decide can go away. Is that a reasonable expectation, do you think?
Yeah, I think that's right. Now, with the caveat that there are all sorts of approaches, to modify legacy systems to give them the ability to connect. But that connectivity really should be front and center in these deliberations.
You and Christopher write to close this piece, Tom. Congress and the Defense Department need a sophisticated approach for thinking about legacy systems, one that focuses on relevance to contemporary competition and conflict. What do you think the appetite is for that? Because that requires a rethinking on the parts of the committees of jurisdiction, it strikes me, and not just the department itself.
Your lead-in, you mentioned the House Future of Defense Task Force, and just the existence of that task force, its report, and I think the commitment of its members those are all very hopeful signs as far as this conversation is concerned. I think there are members who are committed, and we need to support them as we move forward.
Are there individual systems that one should watch as potentially markers that if Congress can't agree to get rid of this, then the rest, something more sophisticated or more subjective, might be more difficult? Do things like that exist, Tom?
I'd rather not go in that direction, just because I think it's here to date it's been too much. A legacy system is something that I don't like. And think it should go away. In many cases that may be correct. In other cases it's incorrect. I think we need to have that disciplined discussion and debate, and let the results come out of that debate.
Fair answer, Tom. Thanks very much for joining me. It's great to have you on the program.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.